Alrighty, folks, welcome to Building Automation TV Episode 2. What is a building automation server? And we're going to be doing things a little bit differently today. So here's how we're going to do it. Rather than using a whiteboard, I'm actually going to go and show you all right here, a server. So here's what we're going to take a look at. We are going to look at a server. I'm going to talk through what a server is, and this should actually help demystify for a lot of you what a server is, because that seems to be one of the challenges is what is a server. Folks envision this kind of physical machine as a server, and it's not actually just a specific type of machine. It's actually a type of software, and this software is running what are called services, and these services are doing a specific task. So what I've done here, and this is something any of you all can do, is that you can actually go to Amazon Web Services, and via Amazon Web Services, you're able to actually go and create a free account for 12 months and stand up a server, just like I did here, and then you're able to play around with the servers. So that will be something that will benefit you greatly. All right, so let's take a look here at this server right here. So right here, we've got this server dashboard. So when you're creating a building automation server, the first thing you need to look at, and I'm just going to double check right here, make sure that my stream is coming through just fine. It is awesome. All right, so the first thing you need to do when you're looking at a server and trying to understand if you need a building automation server or not is you need to kind of understand what is a server, as I said. Well, a server is a dedicated set of software that runs services. So you can see that this server has services right here. In this case, it is just running file and storage services. However, if I wanted to go and do something like add another service to this server, I could do that, and I could go and add a variety of services. But the main services you are going to be experiencing as a building automation professional is this sucker right here, this web server IIS, or Internet Information Systems. And so you hear about all these HTML5 graphics, you hear about building automation systems going HTML5 or web user interfaces. Well, that is all run through this kind of IIS web server. So what that allows you to do, and I'll show you that on my computer in just a second, but what that allows you to do is that actually allows you to send resources to other computers known as clients. All right, so far we've talked through that you've got servers, and these servers provide a service, a dedicated service. And I'm showing you kind of some of the services like Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol server, which would be something that hands out IP addresses dynamically. I'm sure you've seen that when you log on to a network and it gives you an IP address. You've also probably heard of web servers, which I just explained are serving up web pages. And then you've got something called Hyper-V, and this does virtualization. So a lot of folks are wondering, hey, when do I use a server? This is a common question I get. When do I use a server? When do I not use a server? Now, in the past, it used to be that building automation systems had this kind of rigid architecture where you would go and you would have these BAS servers, and I'm making air quotes here, and these BAS servers, what would happen, right, is that these BAS servers would be these dedicated machines that then would go and serve to a dedicated client. It wasn't a web interface. This client would have to be running what's called thick software. So when I came into the field, I worked for Allerton initially, and Allerton had this Envision for Backtalk software. And this software, you had to install it on a client on a desktop machine, and then it would connect back to their supervisory devices. And that would then, you'd have this kind of USB dongle that you'd plug in to license that software, okay? Well, that all kind of changed when we started to get away from having thick clients. You started to see that with Java. And for some of you who haven't been in the field, this may be something new to you because you haven't experienced all this, all right? But don't worry, we'll take you there. I promise by the time we finish this kind of 20, 30-minute chat here, all this will make sense. So if some of this stuff, the backstory I'm giving you doesn't make sense because you haven't, done 5, 10 years in the field and you're like, what do you mean by that? Don't worry, it'll all make sense by the time we're done. All right, so you've got these kind of software, these thick clients. Initially, like I said, it was envisioned for Backtalk for Allerton, but then folks started shifting to where they were using Java, which is basically like this programming software, right? And this Java user interface, it would go and it would create a user interface on a machine. And then finally we moved to this web server where we would serve up resources. Now I told you I would show you what a web server looked like, okay? So let me do that real quick. I'm going to drag this over. This is my computer. This is IIS, right? And so IIS runs websites. And under this website, you will have a series of files under here. So if I type in, if I remember correctly, 127.0.0.1, you're going to see that this is going to pop up right here. You're seeing Internet Information Services. This is the web server that I'm running on my physical computer, okay? So my computer is running a web server, and then I'm able to connect to it using a user interface called, in this case, Internet Explorer, or I could use Chrome. And I send what's called a request to this server, and then the server responds with this file. But like I said earlier, we haven't answered the question, when do you need a server? Why do you use a server? Okay, well, let's imagine, right, that I'm simply connecting to a supervisory device. And a supervisory device, we kind of covered that in the previous episode. So if you haven't watched episode 1, you really want to, because that makes sense of what a supervisory device is. But essentially, a supervisory device, let me see if I can pull one up here. Network Automation Engine. Okay, so I'll pull this up here, and we'll take a look-see at this. So this is a supervisory device, right? It has a processor in here, it has memory, it has storage, it has a mini web server, and it can go and serve up graphics. It can go and store trends and alarms. It's got some field trunks right here. You can connect it to the internet, or you could connect it to a local network. It's basically a building automation system in a box. So why would you need a server, right? What is the point of even having a server? Like, what is that going to do for you that this little thing can't do? Well, go with me on this. Remember in episode 1, and like I said, if you didn't watch episode 1, not a big deal. We're gonna cover it, but definitely go back. So this little network automation engine, it's sitting here, it's all happy. It's like, yeah, I'm a network automation engine, cool. And it is providing graphics, it's trending and alarming points, it's giving you an interface to points. But let's say that you have another network automation engine in another building. Or let's say this is a 40-story building and you have 20, 30 of these. Well, it gets to a point where if you try to feed all of these supervisory devices into one supervisory device, one, they can't do that. But two, you get to a point where you have to go and have all these supervisory devices feeding into another device, and this device has to process and normalize all those points and create graphics and do all these things. Well, that causes a problem. And that's the problem that servers address. And that problem is that, imagine this, right? So you have, let me think of an example. You have a building automation system, right? And it's an older building automation system. And then you have another older building automation system. And you have another older building automation system. You have 3 different building automation systems, right? Now, if you wanted to see the graphics from all three of those, how would you go and you tie those together? You would use some sort of higher end system that all those would feed into, and you'd have a standard graphic. That way you had one place to go to for graphics, you had one place for trend storage, one place for alarming. That's the problem that a server solves for all these supervisory devices. So when do you go and use a server? The general rule of thumb is if you exceed 200 devices, field controllers, or 3 supervisory devices, then you'll go and use a server. Because at that point, you've got enough data points and you're going to have enough systems and graphics that it's going to go and make the most sense to have a server. Okay, so now that we've covered when we'd have a server, another really important point that I want you to take away from this, and now I'm going to start to go into some tips. I've given you a very brief overview of what servers are. I've given you a brief overview of why we would use servers. I've shown you both a server here, and by showing you this, my hope is that you are going and feeling much more comfortable with the servers. You're going and feeling that, oh, this doesn't look that unfamiliar. It doesn't look that different than Windows 10. So I want you to be comfortable. But here's the deal. You're seeing the server, and now, like I said, I'm going to give you tips. So the first tip I'm going to give you is do not be doing what I'm doing right here. All right? Do not log directly into the server unless you're doing some server maintenance. You don't want to view your graphics through the server, because what's having to happen right now is this server is having to spend resources, both memory, storage, and processor capabilities, to go and provide, right here, we're seeing it, it's having to go and provide a user interface. It's having to process every time I move my mouse around. If I'm clicking on something and opening a new window, it has to process that, and that consumes resources. So oftentimes when I go to a site and folks are like, building automation system, it's so slow, the server's so slow, yada, yada, yada. Well, it's because they're using the server as a user interface. Remember, the purpose of a server is to provide services. One of those services is serving up web pages, like I showed you when I brought up that localhost web page. Now, another really important point with your servers is, especially on larger sites, you want to run single-purpose servers. I could go and I could install SQL, which is a database. I could install web server, IIS. I could install DHCP. I could install Hyper-V. But if I put all these services on this server and it's running at large scale, this could become a very big problem, because once again, we go back to the resource constraints problem. So in an ideal world, you want to run your building automation application, so your web server and then the application that you install, on one server, and then you want to have another server that runs your database. That's for medium to large scale campuses, sites that have more than a couple buildings. If it's just a single building, you could put the BAS web server and the SQL database on the same server. But if it's more than a couple buildings, you really want to separate that out. So that's another really important tip. The third tip that I'm going to go through here is that virtualization is not a scary thing. It's not a hard concept. I'm running a virtual machine right now. This Amazon web server is a cloud-hosted virtual server. You can see it's in the west of the United States. You can see the size. I'm running a free server, so this is very small. It's got very little memory. But the nice capability of this is I could actually go into Amazon and say that if this server fails, it automatically brings up a clone of this server. So I would have permanent uptime. And one of the things I want to show you here, and I'm going to bring this up on my other screen here, is Codora Amazon, or Codora, there we go. Let me bring this over here. Cloud hosting. Here we go. Alrighty, there it is. Perfect. So you can see right here that this company, they actually provide hosting for building automation service. This is actually really unique in that they have cloud hosting for building automation servers. And this is the way a lot of the industry is going, and it's very interesting because this gives you a competitive advantage. Because if you're able to cloud host a server and then have multiple buildings tying into a server, you can actually have a lower price for your initial install because you're going and doing servers and you're using them in the cloud. So what they're doing is they're basically doing what I'm doing right here. They created an image. I think in the case of Codora is that they have Tritium images, and then they are standing up Tritium servers. Basically what they're doing is they're installing Tritium, purchasing a license, and then going and reselling that right here. And you could do that yourself. You could go and just stand up a server on Amazon Web Services, and you could have an image that you then go and license, and you resell that to your customers. I'm not a lawyer. I don't claim to be a lawyer. I don't play a lawyer on TV. So whatever the legal ramifications of relicensing software and reselling software, I do not know the answers to that. You would have to figure that out on your own, and you would have to consult a lawyer for that. With that being said, though, this is a high-level overview of servers right here. Okay, so you're seeing right here that this is a server. Servers provide a dedicated service. They are really simple. They're actually, in my opinion, more simple than client machines. Typically, you're going to set them up for only one service. This is a cloud-hosted virtual server, so they're not scary. They're pretty easy. You can go on Amazon and you can stand one up on your own. And also, the web server, all it's doing is taking a file, as I showed you right here. It is taking a file. Actually, I closed that window, so give me 1 second here. There we go. Like I said, it's taking a file and it's serving that file up from a directory. It's serving up an HTML file. Now, in the next episode, actually, I forgot what I'm doing in the next episode. That's the beauty of live, right? Sometimes you forget stuff. I'll have what the next episode is up in just a little bit. But anyways, as I was saying, last I'm going to recap the tips, right? So the tips are: tip 1, go and make sure that you don't use the server as your user interface. Tip 2 is make sure you use each server for a dedicated service, right? And tip 3 is, if you're able to, use virtualization and maybe even cloud hosting to go and make sure that you have better uptime with your servers. So with that being said, that takes us to the end of the teaching portion of this live stream. And I know that this is a topic a lot of folks have questions on, so I will go and now I will be answering your questions around servers. So if you have a question, just type it into the chat and I will answer any questions you have. And if you're watching this after the fact, thank you so much for watching it. I will go and be kind of looking at that over the week, and if you ask some questions, I will most likely get to answer those questions for you. Alrighty. So with that being said, I don't see any questions coming in the live chat, and that's cool. That actually gives me more time in my day. But let me look up real quick what our agenda is for the next show. And I will have this at the tip of my fingers next time, so I don't have to look this up. But let me take a look right here. Alrighty. Here we go. Not finding it. I'm not finding it. I'll just put it in the comments. Alrighty. And I'm not seeing any questions, so with that, I am going to call today's live show. In the next show, I will be taking you through another topic. If you all have a specific topic you'd like me to cover, or if you have some feedback on how I can make this even better for you, I'd love it if you leave it in the comments. Make sure that you click the little bell in the upper right-hand corner. That way you can be alerted whenever new live streams come up. They come up every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. And I'd love your feedback. I'm definitely figuring out this live streaming thing as I go. Just like with everything I do, I try to be an example to all of you that, even if something feels challenging, even if something is a little scary, just go out and do it and figure it out as you go, because the worst thing you could do is just never do something, and that's just bad. So make sure you just go out and put yourself in uncomfortable positions, do stuff, learn, and get better. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all of you being here, and I definitely look forward to seeing you all in episode 3 of the Building Automation Monthly TV show. Thanks a ton, and take care.